As ancient markings on weathered stone tablets begin to reveal their secrets, an elderly farmer becomes so overwhelmed by the discovery that she collapses to her knees, tears streaming down her face. The mysterious inscriptions unearthed from beneath her drought-stricken orchard would not only challenge understanding of human history, but lead her to a purpose far greater than she ever imagined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Eleanor Wright stood at the edge of her almond orchard, her weathered hands resting on the old wooden fence that had marked her family's property for generations. Her small farm in Tehachapi Valley, nestled between the rolling hills of Southern California, had been in the Wright family since before California became a state. The morning haze was lifting, revealing rows of struggling almond trees that had sustained her family for decades, each one telling its own story of past harvests and hardships. The orchard had once been renowned throughout the region, known for producing the sweetest, most flavorful almonds in the valley. Eleanor's grandmother used to claim the land had been blessed by ancient spirits, though such stories now seemed like wishful thinking. The past 15 years had brought nothing but challenges, with climate change causing unprecedented drought conditions and rising costs, making it nearly impossible to compete with massive corporate farms. Modern irrigation systems remained financially out of reach, with costs that might as well have been written in gold. The bank had already sent 3 foreclosure warnings, citing the orchard's declining productivity as reason enough to reclaim the land. Even the local agricultural extension office had begun to question whether Wright Orchards had a viable future. Eleanor's grandson, studying archaeology at UC Berkeley, had suggested selling the land to developers eager to build luxury homes in the picturesque valley. But the thought of being the Wright who lost the family's ancestral land kept Eleanor awake at night, staring at the ceiling as she considered her dwindling options. Each morning, Eleanor would walk through her orchard before sunrise, just as her mother and grandmother had done before her. She knew every tree, every irrigation line, every patch of soil that had nurtured Wright almonds for generations. The eastern corner of her property, a rocky section that had always been difficult to cultivate, had particularly troubled the family since anyone could remember. Local stories suggested it had once been a sacred site for indigenous peoples, though Eleanor had always viewed such tales as interesting but irrelevant to her practical concerns. This summer had been exceptionally dry, another in a string of drought years that threatened California agriculture. But an unexpected series of thunderstorms had caused a small rockslide in that troublesome eastern corner, revealing something that captured Eleanor's attention. With bills multiplying and the bank threatening imminent action, Eleanor couldn't afford to ignore anything that might offer a solution, no matter how unlikely. The morning began like any other, with Eleanor in her faded blue overalls and worn straw hat, walking the rows of her orchard as the first light of dawn painted the hills in golden hues. Her old border collie, Rusty, trotted faithfully at her side, occasionally darting ahead to investigate interesting scents. Eleanor's mind wandered to happier times as she made her way toward the rockslide she intended to clear. Then it happened. As she began removing stones from the small slide, her hands brushed against something smooth and flat, distinctly different from the natural rocks of the area. It wasn't the rough, irregular shape of shale or granite she'd encountered countless times before. This surface was deliberately crafted, with straight edges and an unnaturally smooth face. Eleanor's fingers trembled slightly as she cleared away more debris, revealing what appeared to be a stone tablet, approximately the size of a dinner plate. The stone was unusual, not the typical granite or sandstone found in the region, but something denser, with a faint bluish-gray tint that seemed to absorb the morning light rather than reflect it. As she carefully extracted it from the rubble, she noticed intricate markings covering its surface, not the random scratches of geological processes, but deliberate, precise engravings unlike any writing system she recognized. They weren't the pictographs of Native American tribes she'd seen in local museums, nor did they resemble any modern alphabet. The moment Eleanor fully freed the tablet from the earth, she experienced something inexplicable, a connection, as if centuries of history were suddenly flowing through her veins. The stone seemed to pulse with a subtle energy, and for a brief moment, she could have sworn she heard distant voices carried on the morning breeze, speaking in a language both foreign and strangely familiar. Little did Eleanor know that this discovery would not only unlock mysteries dating back to the very foundations of human civilization, but would also provide an unexpected salvation for her struggling orchard. The stone tablet in her trembling hands was about to change everything she thought she knew about her land, her heritage, and her purpose in the twilight years of her life. The tablet lay on Eleanor's kitchen table, catching the afternoon light streaming through the window. She had carefully cleaned away the dirt without damaging the intricate engravings, revealing markings that seemed to shift and change as shadows played across the stone surface. The material was unlike anything she'd ever seen, not the typical sandstone or granite of the region, but something altogether different with a distinctive density and the faint blue-gray hue that seemed almost luminescent under certain angles of light. Her grandmother's stories echoed in her mind as she studied the remarkable artifact. The old woman had always insisted their land held secrets from before the Europeans arrived, back when indigenous peoples considered certain places in the valley to be portals to the spirit world. As a child, Eleanor had spent countless hours listening to tales of sacred sites and ancient wisdom, but she dismissed those stories as she grew older, focusing instead on the practical concerns of running an orchard in the modern world. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The kitchen around her told its own story of decline. Paint peeled from the corners of the ceiling, and the ancient refrigerator hummed laboriously, requiring frequent repairs she couldn't afford. Unpaid bills lay scattered across the counter, their red, "past due" stamps a constant reminder of her mounting troubles. The latest bank statement showed an account nearly as barren as her drought-stricken trees, with barely enough to cover next month's minimal expenses. Eleanor reached for her phone, her fingers hovering over the number for the local historical society. It would be the sensible thing to do: report the find, hand it over to authorities, perhaps receive a small finder's fee that might delay the inevitable foreclosure by a month or two. But something held her back. The tablet felt like it belonged here, as much a part of her land as the almond trees that had sustained generations of rights. Her grandson Daniel's latest text message remained unanswered on her phone. She knew what it would say: another gently worded suggestion about selling the orchard to developers, moving to a retirement community, starting fresh. He meant well, but he didn't understand. Wright Orchards wasn't just land and trees. It was 6 generations of stories, struggles, and triumphs. Every irrigation line had been laid by right hands. Every tree had been tended with right determination. The afternoon wore on as Eleanor examined the tablet more closely. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, the engravings precise and deliberate, with symbols that seemed familiar yet impossible to place. Some appeared almost like ancient Hebrew or Aramaic that she'd seen in documentaries, but others were entirely unfamiliar. As she traced the patterns with her finger, the stone seemed to warm beneath her touch, as if responding to her presence. A knock at the door startled her from her reverie. Through the kitchen window, she could see Professor Sarah Martinez's compact hybrid car parked in the driveway. The archaeologist from the local community college had become a friend over the years, occasionally purchasing almonds directly from the orchard and sharing an interest in the valley's pre-colonial history. Eleanor hesitated, unsure whether to hide the tablet before answering. Sarah was trustworthy enough, but news traveled fast in small communities. Once word got out about her discovery, there'd be no keeping the authorities away. Yet something told her the professor might have insights into the questions burning in her mind. With a deep breath, Eleanor opened the door. Sarah's eyes widened with immediate recognition as she spotted the tablet on the kitchen table. "I felt something had changed in the valley," Sarah said without preamble, stepping past Eleanor into the kitchen. "The energy shifted yesterday afternoon. I've been driving around all morning trying to pinpoint where." She moved closer to the table, her trained eyes examining the tablet without touching it. "Do you understand what you found, Eleanor?" "Right?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "An old stone with some carvings," Eleanor replied, downplaying her own sense of the tablet's significance. "Probably something from the Chumash tribes that once lived here." Sarah shook her head slowly, her expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. "This isn't just any archaeological find for a museum display. If I'm seeing what I think I'm seeing, these markings predate any known writing system in the Americas by thousands of years." Eleanor sank into a kitchen chair, her mind reeling. "That's not possible. The tablet was on my land, just beneath the surface." Sarah continued, her voice taking on the measured cadence of a practiced academic. "There's a reason your family has held this land for so long, Eleanor. A reason the Wrights have been here since before California became a state. Your ancestors weren't just farmers. They were custodians, chosen to protect this ground until the tablets revealed themselves again." The professor's words seemed to make the air in the kitchen grow thick with possibility. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the almond trees with an almost musical sound. The tablet on the table seemed to absorb the light more intensely, as if responding to its story being told. "But why now?" Eleanor asked, her voice hoarse. "Why, after all these generations, would it surface when the orchard is weeks away from being lost?" Sarah's eyes sparkled with understanding. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "that's exactly why. Ancient objects have their own timing, Eleanor. They don't reveal themselves to just anyone, and they don't do it without purpose. The question isn't why the tablet has appeared, it's what you're going to do now that it has." Eleanor sat alone in her kitchen long after Sarah Martinez had left, the archaeologist's words hanging heavy in the air. The tablet still lay on the table before her, its mysterious marking seeming to shift in the fading afternoon light. Her mind raced with possibilities, each more extraordinary than the last, while her practical farmer's sense warned against building castles in the air. The weight of decision pressed down on her shoulders. By law, she knew she should report the find to the proper authorities. There were strict regulations about archaeological discoveries, particularly those potentially connected to indigenous heritage, and the penalties for keeping such finds could be severe. The sensible course of action was clear. Contact officials, let the experts handle it, perhaps earn a small reward for her honesty. It would be enough to keep the bank at bay, for a few more weeks at least. But Sarah's words about custodianship and ancient responsibilities wouldn't leave her mind. She pulled out her grandmother's old journal from the hutch drawer, its leather cover worn smooth by decades of handling. The old woman had meticulously recorded family stories and local legends, preserving tales that stretched back to when the first Wright had settled in the valley. Eleanor had always assumed they were just colorful family lore, but now, with the tablet before her, every word seemed to carry new weight. Her fingers trembled slightly as she turned the yellowed pages. There it was, the tale of how the Wrights came to this particular plot of land. According to her grandmother's flowing script, their ancestor Abigail Wright had been guided to this specific valley by dreams and visions after the long journey west. The land called to her, the journal claimed, because it held secrets that would sleep in the earth until a time of greatest need, when ancient wisdom must awaken once more. Eleanor looked up at the tablet on her table, its surface absorbing the last rays of sunset. Was this truly an artifact of immense historical significance? And if it was, What responsibility did that place on her shoulders? Her phone buzzed another. Text from Daniel. Grandma, the bank officer called me again. Please consider the developer's offer. We need to be practical about this. Practical. The words seemed to mock her. What was practical about an ancient tablet appearing in her orchard? What was practical about being the descendant of custodians entrusted with protecting forgotten knowledge? Standing up, Eleanor paced the kitchen floor, her mind working through every angle. If she kept the tablet hidden, she'd be breaking the law. But if Sarah was right, if the old family stories contained truth, then surrendering it to a museum might be breaking a far older and more important trust. The tablet hadn't revealed itself to be locked away in a glass case. It had come to her, a right on right land. The wind picked up outside, rustling through the struggling almond trees. Eleanor's eyes were drawn to the photographs on the wall, 6 generations of Wrights standing proud on this same land. Her mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, all the way back to sepia-toned images of stern-faced women who had worked this soil before her. Had they known? Had they felt the weight of this guardianship even without understanding it? A sudden memory surfaced, her mother's last words before passing the orchard to her. The land remembers, Eleanor. Trust in that when times are hard. At the time, she'd taken it as simple farmer's wisdom. Now those words carried a different resonance entirely. Moving back to the table, Eleanor reached out and grasped the tablet with both hands. That same surge of connection she'd felt in the orchard rushed through her again, stronger this time. The stone warmed beneath her touch, and for a moment, she could have sworn she heard distant sounds, chanting voices, ceremonial drums, ancient prayers carried on the wind. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a call from the bank. Eleanor let it ring out. The choice before her wasn't just about an archaeological artifact or her struggling orchard anymore. It was about heritage, about responsibility, about keeping faith with something larger than herself. The practical world of banks and developers suddenly seemed less real than the mysteries that had been sleeping beneath her trees all along. Moving with sudden purpose, Eleanor went to the old root cellar behind the house. Beneath stacked preserves and gardening supplies, she found what she was looking for, a cedar chest that predated even the main house itself. Her grandmother had used it to store family heirlooms, but it had been mostly empty for years now. The thick wood and brass fittings had protected family treasures for generations. Perhaps they could protect one more. As she carefully wrapped the tablet in her grandmother's old quilt, Eleanor made her decision. She would keep the tablet hidden, at least until she could understand more about its significance. Sarah Martinez would help her research the markings, discover what messages they might contain. There would be risks, yes, but somehow those seemed less frightening than the risk of betraying her family's ancient trust. Back in the kitchen, she finally responded to Daniel's text. Her grandson's practical concerns deserved an answer, even if she couldn't tell him the whole truth yet. The orchard still has secrets to reveal, she wrote in reply. Give me time to explore them before we make any final decisions. Outside, the stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, the same stars that had watched over this land when it held its secrets, when her ancestors first took up their custodian's duty. Eleanor Wright, modern farmer, practical businesswoman, and now perhaps something more, stood in her doorway and felt the weight of ages settling onto her shoulders. The choice was made. Now she had to live with the consequences, whatever they might be. The following days took on a dreamlike quality as Eleanor divided her time between her regular orchard duties and studying the tablet. Every morning before dawn broke over the Tehachapi Hills, she would descend into the cool darkness of the root cellar, unwrap the ancient stone from her grandmother's quilt, and spend an hour examining its mysteries. The markings that had initially seemed random were beginning to show patterns, recurring symbols that appeared at regular intervals across the surface. Sarah Martinez became a frequent visitor to the orchard, arriving each evening with armfuls of reference books and archaeological journals from her personal collection. The professor's knowledge of ancient writing systems and Middle Eastern archaeology proved invaluable as they worked to decipher the tablet's secrets. They set up a makeshift research station in Eleanor's dining room, spreading out Sarah's books, alongside her grandmother's journal, cross-referencing ancient scripts with historical records. "See here," Sarah said one evening, her finger tracing a particular sequence of symbols. "This grouping resembles Proto-Sinaitic script, but it's older, more primitive in form." She pulled out a worn academic journal, its pages marked with sticky notes. According to this research, certain Middle Eastern writing systems may have roots far earlier than we've previously established. These aren't just decorative patterns, Eleanor, they're messages. As they worked to understand the tablet's markings, strange things began happening around the orchard. The first change was subtle. The almond trees nearest to where Eleanor had found the tablet began showing new growth, their leaves greener and more vibrant than they had been in years despite the continuing drought conditions. The trees in surrounding areas soon followed, standing taller and producing healthier blossoms than Eleanor had seen in a decade. Eleanor noticed other changes too. The chronic arthritis in her hands, a constant companion after years of hard agricultural work, had begun to ease. She felt stronger, more energetic, as if some of the tablet's ancient energy was flowing into the land and everything connected to it. One morning while checking the eastern section of her orchard, Eleanor discovered a natural spring had appeared where none had been before. Clear, sweet water bubbled up from between the rocks, forming a small pool before trickling down toward the area where she'd found the tablet. The water caught the morning light in an unusual way, seeming to shimmer with the same bluish tint she'd noticed in the stone. The ancient texts speak of blessed waters appearing when sacred sites awaken, Sarah explained when Eleanor showed her the spring. Many archaeological sites in the Middle East are associated with natural springs that were considered sacred. The professor dipped her hand in the pool, tasting the water. Pure and sweet, like the ancient springs mentioned in biblical texts. Word of the changes at Wright Orchards began to spread through the community. Neighbors commented on how her trees were looking better than they had in years. The local agricultural cooperative took notice when her almonds came in earlier and more flavorful than expected. Eleanor deflected questions with vague references to trying new organic methods, but she could tell people were curious about the sudden transformation. Daniel called more frequently now, his tone shifting from concern to cautious optimism as Eleanor reported the orchard's improved conditions. She hadn't told him about the tablet, couldn't tell him, not yet, but his latest calls had lost their urgent suggestions about selling the land. "Whatever you're doing, Grandma, it seems to be working," he said during their last conversation. "Your yield projections look better than anything we've seen in 20 years. But it was during one of her early morning sessions with the tablet that Eleanor experienced something that left no doubt about its power. As usual, she had taken it from its hiding place and unwrapped it carefully. The first rays of dawn were just beginning to filter through the cellar's narrow window when her hand brushed against a particular sequence of symbols near the center of the stone. The marking began to glow with a soft blue light, and suddenly the cellar around her seemed to fade away. She found herself standing on the same land, but in a different time. Robed figures moved across the valley, gathering around a central stone altar. At the head of the assembly stood a tall figure holding a tablet identical to the one in Eleanor's possession, its surface glowing with the same blue light. The vision was gone in an instant, but it left her shaking with its intensity. Sarah wasn't surprised when Eleanor described her experience. "The tablet is showing you what it wants you to see," the professor said. In ancient traditions, certain objects were believed to contain memories, imprints of significant events that could be accessed by those deemed worthy. But why it's showing you these particular visions, that's what we need to understand. Eleanor spent hours transcribing every detail of her vision into a notebook alongside their ongoing translations of the tablet's markings. Patterns were emerging references to celestial events, yes, but also to healing, to renewal, to the awakening of sacred powers in the land. The tablet, it seemed, was more than just an archaeological curiosity. It was a key to something larger, something that had been sleeping beneath her orchard for centuries. The bank had stopped calling, perhaps satisfied by the improved condition of the orchard and Eleanor's ability to make her recent payments on time. But she knew this period of relative calm was just the beginning. The tablet's appearance, the changes in her land, the visions, they all pointed to something approaching, something that would demand more of her than simply being a caretaker of ancient secrets. As summer deepened into early autumn, Eleanor could feel the momentum building. Each morning brought new growth, new strength to her trees. Each evening spent studying with Sarah revealed new layers of meaning in the tablet's mysterious script. She was no longer simply preserving her family's orchard. She was participating in the awakening of something ancient and powerful. But even as hope and wonder filled her days, a shadow of anxiety lurked at the edges of her mind. Such power rarely came without a price, and the ancient texts Sarah shared were full of warnings about the responsibilities and dangers that came with awakening dormant energies. Eleanor couldn't help but wonder what challenges lay ahead, what tests she would face as the tablet's chosen guardian. For now, though, she focused on documenting every change, every sign, every piece of the growing mystery. The tablet had chosen, this time, to reveal itself for a reason. All she could do was prepare herself for whatever was coming and hope she would prove worthy of the trust placed in her by both her ancestors and the ancient power stirring beneath her orchard. The peace of early autumn was shattered one foggy morning when Eleanor discovered footprints in the soft earth near the root cellar. Someone had been prowling around her property in the night, paying particular attention to the old cellar door. Her heart raced as she followed the tracks, which led directly to her hiding place before disappearing toward the main road. That same day, a glossy black SUV pulled up to her farmhouse. Two men in expensive suits emerged, introducing themselves as representatives from a private antiquities collection. They spoke with cultured East Coast accents and carried leather portfolios that seemed out of place in the dusty orchard setting. "We've heard rumors," the taller one said, "about certain artifacts being discovered in this region. We're prepared to make a very generous offer for any items of historical significance. No questions asked, no regulatory complications." Eleanor's blood ran cold. She hadn't told anyone about the tablet except Sarah, and she trusted the professor implicitly, yet somehow word had gotten out. She denied any knowledge of archaeological finds, but she could tell by their knowing smiles that they didn't believe her. As they left, the shorter man handed her a business card with a phone number and an eye-watering sum written on the back, enough to pay off the orchard's debts 10 times over. That evening, when Sarah arrived for their usual research session, Eleanor shared her concerns. The professor's face grew grave. "There have always been those who seek ancient power for their own gain," she said, her voice low and urgent. "The tablet's awakening sends ripples through the world that certain people can sense. We must be more careful." But careful wasn't enough. Over the next few days, more strangers appeared at the orchard. Some were obvious treasure hunters, barely bothering to disguise their interest. Others were more subtle, a water quality inspector asking to test all the property's water sources, a real estate assessor claiming to be updating county records. Each time, Eleanor felt their hungry eyes searching her land, looking for signs of the power they could sense but couldn't quite locate. The situation took a darker turn when Eleanor began experiencing intense headaches and vivid nightmares. In her dreams, she saw robed figures battling across her orchard, the tablet burning with blue fire as shadowy forces tried to claim it. She would wake in a cold sweat, the tablet's markings pulsing with an urgent light in its hiding place below. Sarah's research revealed a disturbing pattern. The tablet's guardians have faced trials like this before, she explained, showing Eleanor an ancient text on Middle Eastern archaeological discoveries. When sacred power awakens, it attracts both light and shadow. The tablet tests its guardian's resolve before revealing its full purpose. The pressure began to affect Eleanor's health. She lost weight, dark circles formed under her eyes, and her hands trembled as she performed her daily orchard work. The very energy that had been healing her land seemed to be draining her, as if the tablet was demanding proof of her commitment to its cause. Daniel noticed the change during their weekly video calls. "Grandma, you look terrible," he said, his face creased with worry. "I'm coming home this weekend. Whatever's going on, you don't have to handle it alone." Eleanor wanted to tell him everything, but how could she explain what she herself barely understood? The breaking point came when Eleanor found the root cellar broken open one night. The intruders had left empty-handed. She had taken to carrying the tablet with her everywhere. The violation of her sanctuary hit her hard. That same night, a fever took hold of her, burning through her body like fire. As she lay in her bed, delirious with fever, the tablet's markings began to glow with an intensity she'd never seen before. Through her fever-hazed vision, Eleanor saw figures moving in her bedroom, shadows of ancient priests, whispers in a language she didn't understand but somehow knew. The tablet was trying to tell her something, show her something, but the message was lost in the storm of her illness. Her last conscious thought before the fever took her completely was a desperate prayer that she would prove strong enough for whatever test this was. The tablet that had brought such promise now seemed to be bringing destruction. As Eleanor's consciousness faded in and out, she couldn't help but wonder if she had made a terrible mistake in keeping it. Perhaps some powers were better left sleeping. In the earth, some secrets better left buried in time. But even as these doubts plagued her fevered mind, she knew it was too late to turn back. The tablet had chosen her, and whatever the cost, she would have to see this journey through to its end. Daniel Wright arrived at the orchard to find his grandmother burning with fever in her bedroom, muttering about ancient tablets and sacred guardians. The farmhouse was unnaturally cold, despite the autumn warmth outside, and a strange blue light seemed to flicker at the edges of his vision whenever he turned away. He immediately called Dr. Harriet Chun, the local physician who had treated 3 generations of Wrights. As he waited for the doctor, Daniel noticed strange details around the house. His grandmother's usually tidy kitchen was covered in old books and papers, many written in languages he didn't recognize. Unusual symbols had been sketched on numerous pages alongside notes in his grandmother's increasingly erratic handwriting. Most puzzling was a rough drawing of a stone tablet, meticulously detailed with symbols that made his eyes hurt when he tried to focus on them too long. Dr. Chun arrived quickly, her electric car humming quietly up the gravel driveway. The experienced doctor had been treating the Wrights since before Daniel was born, and her concerned expression deepened as she examined Eleanor. "This is no ordinary fever," she said, putting away her stethoscope. "I've seen something like this before, years ago, when your great-grandmother—" She stopped abruptly, sharing a meaningful look with Professor Martinez, who had appeared silently in the doorway. Daniel hadn't even heard the archaeologist arrive, but somehow her presence seemed expected, necessary even. The 2 women stepped into the hallway, speaking in hushed tones that Daniel strained to hear. "It's happening." "Again then?" Dr. Chun asked. "It is," Sarah replied. "But this time it's different. The connection is stronger, and so are those who would claim it. Does he know? Not yet, but he needs to. He's part of this too." Daniel stepped into the hallway, his patience exhausted. "I'm right here," he said firmly. "And I need to know what's happening to my grandmother." The 2 women exchanged glances again before Sarah nodded slowly. "It's time," she said. "Young man, what do you know about your family's true history?" What followed was a story that should have seemed impossible, but somehow resonated with memories Daniel had almost forgotten: his grandmother's tales of ancestral dreams, his childhood fascination with the eastern corner of the orchard, where the trees always seemed different, the strange comfort he'd always felt among the almond trees, despite choosing a life far from agriculture. Sarah spoke of custodians and sacred trusts, of knowledge sleeping in the earth, and of a tablet that was more than just an archaeological curiosity. "Your grandmother found it," Sarah explained, "as it was foretold. But the power is overwhelming her because she's trying to bear it alone. The tablet was never meant to have a single guardian. It needs the strength of the whole bloodline." Dr. Chun added her own knowledge, explaining how she'd seen similar symptoms in Eleanor's mother years ago, during what the family had called a stress collapse, but was apparently something far different. "Your great-grandmother was searching for it too," she said. "The fever came when she got close, but she didn't have what your grandmother has, the tablet itself. And you, Daniel, your generation was always meant to be part of this." Daniel's mind reeled as pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known existed fell into place. His unexpected aptitude for ancient languages that had led him to archaeology, the dreams of desert landscapes and stone structures he'd had since childhood, his inexplicable reluctance to see the orchard sold despite its financial troubles. "Where is it?" he asked. "The tablet, where does she keep it?" Sarah led them to the root cellar, but the tablet wasn't there. Following some instinct he didn't understand, Daniel went to his grandmother's room. There, wrapped in a faded quilt, and clutched in his grandmother's fevered hands, lay the ancient stone. As he approached, the tablet's markings began to glow with a soft blue light. When Daniel touched the stone, something extraordinary happened. The fever flush in his grandmother's cheeks began to fade, and her breathing eased. The tablet's glow steadied, becoming warmer and more constant. He felt energy flowing through him, not overwhelming like it had been for his grandmother, but controlled, balanced. "The tablet recognizes its own," Sarah said softly. "It needs both of you, the elder guardian and the younger, past and future, working together." This was never a burden meant to be carried alone. Over the next few days, as Eleanor slowly recovered, grandmother and grandson began to work together to understand their shared legacy. Daniel's academic knowledge of ancient languages combined with his grandmother's deep connection to the land proved to be a powerful combination. The tablet's markings, which had been puzzling Eleanor for weeks, began to make more sense when Daniel applied his archaeological training to Sarah's historical insights. The mysterious visitors who had been plaguing the orchard ceased their attempts to approach. Something in the renewed energy of the place seemed to warn them away. The tablet's power, now properly balanced between two guardians, strengthened the land's ancient protections. Dr. Chun became a regular visitor, sharing medical knowledge that had been passed down through generations of local healers. She spoke of traditional healing practices that worked with the land's energy, techniques that had been dismissed as folk medicine, but were proving remarkably effective when combined with the tablet's power. The fever had broken not just Eleanor's illness, but also the isolation that had nearly destroyed her. As grandmother and grandson worked together, supported by the wisdom of Sarah and Dr. Chun, the true purpose of the tablet's appearance began to become clear. Wasn't just about preserving the past. It was about building a bridge to the future, combining ancient knowledge with new understanding. Daniel postponed his return to Berkeley, knowing his education could continue here in ways no conventional university could match. There were mysteries still to unravel, powers still to understand, and challenges still to face, but now they would face them together, as the tablet had always intended. The first signs of transformation began on a misty morning in late autumn. Eleanor and Daniel stood at the edge of the eastern orchard where the tablet had first been discovered, watching as the sun broke through the clouds. The tablet, now carried in a specially crafted leather pouch that Sarah had provided, rested in Eleanor's hands while Daniel held their grandmother's journal, its pages filled with new notes and observations. "There's something different about the air today," Daniel said, his academic skepticism giving way to the intuition that seemed to grow stronger each day. The morning mist indeed had an unusual quality. It swirled in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, forming and reforming. Shapes that reminded them of the symbols on the tablet's surface. Eleanor removed the tablet from its pouch, its surface gleaming with that distinctive bluish tint they'd come to know so well. As she held it toward the ground, the earth beneath their feet began to hum with a subtle vibration. Daniel quickly opened the journal, ready to document whatever was about to happen. The mist gathered more thickly around them, and within it they began to see images, not the vague suggestions of their imaginations, but clear pictures as if projected on the air itself. They saw their land as it had been millennia ago, when an ancient community had used it as a sacred site. The images shifted, showing how the ancient peoples had worked with the land's natural energy not just for religious ceremonies but for healing, for growing, for maintaining the delicate balance between human needs and natural cycles. As they watched, transfixed, the tablet's markings began to glow with increasing intensity. The light spread from the stone into the ground, following invisible patterns that crisscrossed their property. Where the light touched, the land seemed to awaken, the soil structure visibly changed. Decades of chemical residue breaking down and dispersing, beneficial microorganisms multiplying before their eyes. "It's not just making the trees healthy," Daniel realized, frantically writing in the journal. "It's restoring the entire ecosystem to what it was meant to be, what it was before modern agriculture disrupted the natural balance." His training in environmental archaeology helped him understand what they were seeing: soil composition changing, water retention improving, the entire biological community of the orchard shifting toward a healthier, more sustainable equilibrium. Eleanor felt the tablet's power flowing through her, but this time it wasn't overwhelming. With Daniel beside her, the energy found its proper balance. She understood now why the tablet had appeared when it did, not just because the orchard was in trouble, but because the time had come for old knowledge and new understanding to work together. The transformation spread outward from where they stood, like ripples in a pond. The struggling almond trees began to strengthen and revitalize. Underground water sources, long depleted by decades of drought and overpumping, began to replenish themselves. The very air seemed to become cleaner, charged with the same vital energy that had made this place special to their ancestors. Sarah Martinez arrived just as the mist was beginning to clear, her timing as impeccable as ever. The archaeologist stood in awe at the edge of the orchard, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I've waited my entire career to see this," she whispered. The ancient text spoke of it, the Great Restoration, when the land would remember itself. The changes weren't limited to their own property. Neighboring farms reported mysterious improvements in their soil and water quality. Crops began growing with unusual vigor. Livestock showed increased health and vitality, and the whole region seemed to be experiencing a subtle but undeniable renaissance. Word spread quickly through the agricultural community. Environmental scientists arrived to study the phenomenon, though Eleanor and Daniel were careful to keep the tablet's existence secret. The experts' instruments recorded remarkable improvements in soil composition, water quality, and biodiversity, but couldn't explain the cause. Daniel's former professors at Berkeley were particularly interested, though his carefully worded research papers never mentioned ancient magic or glowing tablets. That evening, as the three of them sat in the kitchen reviewing Daniel's notes, Sarah shared another piece of ancient knowledge. "The tablet isn't just an artifact," she explained. "It's a key that unlocks the land's memory. Ancient cultures knew that the earth itself holds wisdom, power, and healing. They didn't just live on the land. They lived with it, as partners in a sacred trust." Eleanor and Daniel's work with the tablet had only begun. Each day brought new discoveries, new understanding of how to blend ancient wisdom with modern knowledge. The tablet's markings, they learned, weren't just symbolic or historical. They were instructions, a manual for working with the land's natural energies. The bank calls had stopped entirely now. The orchard's impressive productivity spoke for itself, and there was even talk of establishing a research center for sustainable agriculture on their land. Daniel's professors were eager to study their innovative farming methods, though they remained puzzled by the unprecedented results. As autumn deepened toward winter, grandmother and grandson established a routine. Mornings were spent working with the tablet, learning to direct and balance its energy. Afternoons were for conventional orchard work, now remarkably easier with the land's renewed vitality. Evenings were devoted to study, with Sarah sharing her vast knowledge of ancient cultures while Daniel applied his academic research skills to understanding the tablet's deeper mysteries. The mysterious visitors who had plagued them earlier seemed to have given up their pursuit, perhaps sensing that the tablet's power was now properly anchored and protected. The land itself had become a guardian, its restored energy creating subtle but effective barriers against those with ill intent. What had begun as a desperate discovery in a rocky corner had transformed into something far greater, a revival of ancient knowledge, a restoration of natural balance, and most importantly, the renewal of the deep bond between the land and its guardians. The tablet had indeed brought them a treasure beyond imagination, but not in the way anyone could have expected. The revelation came on the winter solstice, a date that Sarah had been anticipating with growing excitement. The ancient texts speak of times when the veil between worlds grows thin, she had explained, spreading ancient manuscripts across the kitchen table. The solstice was sacred to many ancient cultures, a time when the full purpose of sacred objects could be understood. As the sun set that evening, Eleanor and Daniel stood in the center of their rejuvenated orchard, the tablet held between them. The stone's markings had been growing steadily brighter as the day progressed, and now they shone with an intensity that illuminated the gathering dusk. Sarah stood nearby, clutching their grandmother's journal, ready to record whatever might happen. The last ray of sunlight caught the tablet's edge, and suddenly the air around them shifted. The mist that had become familiar during their morning work with the tablet returned, but this time it formed a perfect circle around them. Within its bounds, they could see layers of time overlapping ancient ceremonies taking place on the same ground where they stood, generations of their ancestors maintaining this sacred trust through centuries. But it was more than just visions. This time, the tablet's markings began to move, shifting and rearranging themselves on the stone. What had seemed like decorative patterns suddenly revealed themselves as a complex text, a message left by the tablet's original creators, meant only for those who proved worthy of understanding it. "The tablet is not the treasure," Daniel read aloud, his voice trembling as the ancient words somehow became clear to him. "It is the key to the treasure, the knowledge of how to live in harmony with the land's power." This wisdom was not lost. It was hidden, waiting for those who would understand its true value. Eleanor felt a surge of understanding. The tablet had never been meant as a ritual object alone, but as a tool of healing and renewal. The ancient peoples hadn't just been religious practitioners. They had been guardians of an understanding of how to work with the natural world's own energy and power. The mysterious visitors who had tried to claim the tablet would never have unlocked its true potential. They had sought it as a source of power over the land, when its real purpose was to teach cooperation with the land. The tablet had chosen the Wrights not because they were special, but because they had maintained their connection to the earth through generations of faithful stewardship. As these revelations unfolded, the tablet's light spread outward, illuminating the entire orchard. They could see the network of ancient energy lines clearly now, understanding how they connected their land to other sacred sites across the region. Their small orchard wasn't just a plot of agricultural land. It was a crucial point in an ancient system of natural power and healing. Sarah's voice shook with emotion as she documented everything in the journal. "This is what the old stories meant," she said. "The treasure of the ancients wasn't gold or magical objects. It was this knowledge, this understanding of how to work with the land itself. And you two, you've proven worthy of it." The tablet's light began to fade as the first stars appeared, but the understanding remained. Eleanor and Daniel looked at each other, overwhelmed by the responsibility and possibility of what they had learned. Their family's role as guardians hadn't just been about protecting a piece of land. It was about preserving the possibility of this moment, when ancient wisdom could be reawakened and applied to the modern world's needs. "This isn't just about saving our orchard anymore, is it?" Daniel asked, though he already knew the answer. Eleanor shook her head. "No, it's about showing others the way. The tablet found us because we needed its help, but also because the world needs this knowledge again." As they walked back to the farmhouse, the magnitude of their discovery settled over them. They were no longer just farmers struggling to save their family land. They had become custodians of something far more precious, the understanding of how to restore harmony between human needs and natural power. The tablet had indeed brought them a treasure beyond imagination, but not in the form of gold or magic. It had given them something far more valuable, the knowledge of their true heritage and the means to help heal not just their own land, but to show others the way as well. Word of the Wright orchard's extraordinary transformation spread far beyond the small Tehachapi community. Agricultural experts from universities across the country began arriving to study what they called the Wright phenomenon. The orchard's soil showed unprecedented levels of fertility, its water tested purer than any natural source in the region, and the almonds yielded harvests that defied conventional explanation. Dr. Jonathan Keller, a leading expert in regenerative agriculture from Cornell University, was the first to recognize something truly revolutionary in their methods. "What the Wrights have achieved here goes beyond organic farming or traditional techniques," he announced at a prestigious agricultural conference. "They've somehow tapped into principles of land management that we're only beginning to understand scientifically." Daniel's former professors at Berkeley were particularly intrigued. His research papers on traditional California farming methods, carefully worded to exclude any mention of ancient tablets or mystical energies, were gaining attention in academic circles. He spoke of inherited ecological wisdom and bioregenerative techniques, translating their supernatural experiences into language the scientific community could accept. Eleanor found herself hosting delegations of farmers from across California and beyond, all eager to learn their methods. She and Daniel had developed a careful way of demonstrating their techniques without revealing the tablet's existence. They spoke of ancient farming wisdom, of working with the land's natural energy, of understanding the deeper patterns of growth and renewal. "Watch how the morning mist moves across the orchard," Eleanor would explain to her visitors. "The old stories say it shows you where the energy flows." She didn't mention that she and Daniel used the tablet's guidance to see these patterns clearly, but even without its visible glow, others could begin to sense the special nature of the land. The orchard became a center for what the media called the New California Agricultural Renaissance. Journalists wrote glowing articles about the return to traditional methods yielding modern results. Environmental scientists praised their water conservation techniques and soil regeneration methods. Economic analysts noted how the Wright model could revitalize struggling agricultural communities throughout the drought-stricken West. One crisp winter morning, a particularly distinguished visitor arrived at the orchard. Dr. Rebecca Goldstein, America's leading expert on Dead Sea Scrolls and ancient Middle Eastern artifacts, had been intrigued by references in Daniel's academic papers to ancient agricultural practices. She arrived unannounced, her keen eyes taking in every detail of the transformed landscape. "There are stories," she said, sitting at their kitchen table, of how certain ancient communities weren't just religious practitioners. They were custodians of a deeper knowledge about working with the land. Her gaze was sharp as she studied Eleanor and Daniel's reactions. The patterns in your orchard match designs found on ancient agricultural artifacts across the Middle East. Your water management system follows the same principles we've discovered in prehistoric farming sites. Eleanor and Daniel shared a look, wondering how much they could safely reveal. Sarah, who had appointed herself their unofficial advisor in such matters, had taught them to be cautious, but not dismissive of those who might understand. I've spent my career studying the intersection of ancient texts and historical fact, Dr. Goldstein continued, pulling out a worn leather notebook. The oldest fragments we found speak of sacred sites where the power of the land was particularly strong, places where ancient wisdom was preserved for future generations. She opened the notebook, revealing sketches of symbols that looked remarkably like those on their tablet. These marks appear on artifacts that predate the oldest biblical texts by thousands of years, she explained. They're part of a system we're only beginning to understand. And somehow, you've managed to implement that system here, bringing it back to life in a way that's measurable, demonstrable, and repeatable. Daniel felt a familiar warmth at his side, the tablet, hidden in its pouch beneath his jacket, responding to the scholar's words. Dr. Goldstein's eyes widened slightly, and Daniel realized she had noticed something. But instead of pushing for answers, she simply nodded. There are some mysteries, she said carefully, that are best understood gradually. What matters is that you're proving something I've long suspected. The ancient peoples didn't just work the land. They worked with it. They understood principles we're only now rediscovering. She pulled out a business card. When you're ready to share more of what you've learned, I hope you'll consider collaborating with my research team. As she left, Eleanor and Daniel felt a weight lift from their shoulders. They had found an ally who understood enough to know what questions not to ask, who could help bridge the gap between their ancient knowledge and the modern world's need for explanation. The tablet's power had brought them more than just agricultural success. It had positioned them to help restore a lost understanding of humanity's relationship with the natural world. Their small orchard was becoming a beacon of hope, showing how ancient wisdom could help solve modern problems. That evening, as they checked the tablet's hiding place in the cedar chest, its markings glowed with what seemed like approval. They were walking a careful line between revealing and protecting their secret, but somehow they knew they were on the right path. The tablet had chosen them not just to preserve its power, but to help share its wisdom in ways the modern world could understand and accept. As winter gave way to spring, the transformation of Wright orchards continued to accelerate. The almond trees, once struggling to survive, now produced blossoms of extraordinary vitality and beauty. Visitors from miles around came just to witness the spectacular flowering, unaware that they were experiencing the rebirth of an ancient power long dormant in the land. Eleanor and Daniel continued their daily work with the tablet, each session revealing new insights into its purpose and power. They discovered that by focusing the tablet's energy on specific areas of the orchard, they could address particular challenges, enhancing soil fertility in one section, improving water retention in another, strengthening the tree's natural defenses against pests in a third. It's like the tablet contains an entire agricultural system, Daniel explained to Sarah during one of their evening research sessions. Not just principles, but specific techniques tailored to different conditions and needs. Sarah nodded, her eyes bright with excitement. The ancient texts speak of such knowledge, comprehensive understanding of how to work with the land's natural systems rather than against them. Modern science is only beginning to grasp what these ancient cultures knew intuitively. Their work soon attracted the attention of broader environmental initiatives. Representatives from state water conservation programs, climate change research institutes, and sustainable agriculture foundations began making pilgrimages to the Wright property. seeking to understand how a small family orchard had achieved what billion-dollar agricultural corporations could not. Eleanor became particularly adept at translating their tablet-guided methods into language that government officials and corporate representatives could understand. She spoke of integrated biological systems and enhanced microbial communities rather than ancient energies and sacred knowledge. Daniel, meanwhile, worked with academic researchers to document the measurable effects of their techniques. The results were undeniable. Soil samples from Wright orchards showed unprecedented levels of microbial diversity and organic matter. Water quality tests revealed purification effects that extended well beyond their property lines. Even the air quality in the vicinity of the orchard registered improvements that environmental scientists struggled to explain. What most fascinated the visiting experts, however, was how the Wright method seemed to spread naturally to neighboring properties. Farms that had adopted even a few of their techniques reported dramatic improvements in their own land's health and productivity. It was as if the tablet's energy, once awakened, wanted to expand beyond the boundaries of the Wright orchard. "It's like watching healing spread," Dr. Chen remarked during one of her regular visits. "In traditional medicine, we talk about restoring the body's natural balance so that health can flow again. You're doing the same thing with the land." Not everyone welcomed these changes, however. As spring progressed, Eleanor and Daniel began to notice unfamiliar vehicles parked along the road near their property. Drone flights over the orchard became frequent enough that Daniel installed equipment to detect and track them. Anonymous emails arrived offering enormous sums for any artifacts discovered on the property. Most troubling were the visits from representatives of AgriNova, one of the largest agricultural corporations in the world. Their offers began as friendly business propositions, partnerships, research funding, exclusive contracts for the Wright's proprietary methods. When these were politely declined, the approaches became more aggressive. "What you've discovered could revolutionize global agriculture," said Victor Mercer, AgriNova's sleek corporate development officer, during his third visit to the orchard. "But without proper development and distribution, it will remain a local curiosity. We have the resources to spread this knowledge worldwide." "Knowledge isn't a commodity to be owned," Eleanor replied firmly. "It's a gift to be shared." Mercer's smile tightened. "Everything has a price, Mrs. Wright, even knowledge. Especially knowledge with this much power." The way he emphasized the last word made it clear that AgriNova suspected there was more to the Wright methods than simple agricultural techniques. After he left, Eleanor and Daniel held an emergency meeting with Sarah and Dr. Chun. "They know something," Daniel said, pacing the kitchen floor. "Maybe not about the tablet specifically, but they sense there's a source, something tangible behind our methods." "AgriNova has been buying up archaeological artifacts for years," Sarah confirmed. "They have an entire division dedicated to historical agricultural research. There are rumors about private collections, underground laboratories studying ancient technologies." "But what could they possibly know about the tablet?" Eleanor asked. "We've been so careful." Dr. Chun's expression was grave. "There are others who guard knowledge similar to yours. Ancient understandings preserved by different cultures around the world. Not all guardians are as dedicated to proper stewardship. Some can be persuaded to share their secrets." The implications settled heavily on them all. The tablet's reawakening might be part of a larger pattern, ancient knowledge resurfacing around the world. And not everyone who sought such knowledge had benevolent intentions. That night, Eleanor dreamed of the tablet surrounded by darkness, its blue glow dimming as shadowy figures reached for it with greedy hands. She woke with a certainty that time was growing short. The tablet had revealed itself to the Wrights, not just for their salvation, but because a greater challenge was approaching, one that would require all the wisdom they had gained. The next morning, Daniel discovered that someone had attempted to break into the root cellar during the night. The sturdy lock had held, but the door showed clear signs of tampering. More alarming were the sophisticated electronic devices he found hidden in the trees, surrounding the cellar surveillance equipment far beyond what common thieves would use. "We need to move the tablet," he told his grandmother urgently. "They're getting closer." Eleanor agreed, but moving the tablet presented its own challenges. They had discovered through painful experience that the stone's power diminished when it was taken too far from the orchard. Its energy seemed rooted in this specific place, connected to the land in ways they didn't fully understand. After consulting with Sarah, they devised a new hiding place, an underground chamber beneath the oldest almond tree in the orchard, the one Eleanor's great-grandmother had planted when the family first acquired the land. Daniel carefully constructed a secure container lined with materials Sarah suggested would help conceal the tablet's energy signature. As they prepared to transfer the tablet to its new hiding place, Eleanor felt a sudden impulse to hold it one last time in the open air. Standing in the dappled sunlight beneath the blossoming trees, she cradled the ancient stone in her hands, its familiar weight and warmth comforting against her skin. "I never asked for this responsibility," she whispered to it. "But I'm grateful. You found me, found us. Whatever comes next, we'll protect what you represent." The tablet's markings pulsed once, brightening momentarily as if in response to her words. Then suddenly, unexpectedly, the entire surface began to glow with an intensity they had never seen before. The light spread from the stone up Eleanor's arms, enveloping her in a nimbus of blue radiance. Daniel rushed to her side, afraid the tablet was overwhelming her again. But Eleanor's expression wasn't one of pain or fear, it was wonder. The light enveloped him too as he touched her shoulder, and in that moment, grandmother and grandson shared a vision more vivid and comprehensive than any they had experienced before. They saw the tablet's origins created by an ancient society, whose knowledge of the Earth's natural systems far exceeded modern understanding. They witnessed how this society had recognized the coming of a great disruption to the natural world and had created the tablet as one of many keys, hidden in sacred places around the globe, each guarded by chosen lineages through the centuries. They saw how these keys were meant to be rediscovered when the Earth faced a similar crisis, when humanity's disconnection from natural systems threatened not just local environments, but the entire planet's balance. The tablet wasn't just a tool for healing their land. It was part of a global network of ancient knowledge designed to help humanity remember what had been forgotten. Most critically, they saw that the tablet alone was incomplete. Its full power could only be realized when connected with other sacred objects, a network of ancient knowledge meant to work in harmony. Somewhere, other guardians were experiencing similar awakenings, rediscovering their own pieces of this ancient wisdom. As the vision faded, Eleanor and Daniel found themselves kneeling on the orchard floor, the tablet now dark between them, as if it had expended enormous energy to share this revelation. "It's bigger than us," Daniel whispered. "Bigger than just this land." Eleanor nodded, her eyes reflecting the enormity of what they'd witnessed. "We're not just guardians of the tablet. We're part of something much larger, a plan set in motion thousands of years ago. But how do we find the others?" Daniel asked. "How do we connect with other guardians?" Before Eleanor could respond, they heard the sound of vehicles approaching, multiple engines, moving fast. Through the trees, they glimpsed black SUVs turning into their driveway, men in tactical gear spilling out onto the gravel. "Agrinova," Daniel breathed. "They're done with negotiations." Eleanor moved with surprising speed for her age, scooping up the tablet and pressing it into Daniel's hands. "Take it," she said urgently. "Use the back trail through the eastern section. Sarah will know where to meet you." "I'm not leaving you," Daniel protested. "You must," Eleanor's voice was firm. "I can delay them, but the tablet cannot fall into their hands. Remember what we just saw. This is bigger than just US now." The sound of men shouting directions to each other grew closer. They had only moments. Grandmother, go. Eleanor pushed him toward the eastern path. The land will hide you. Trust in what it's taught us. Daniel hesitated one moment longer, then wrapped the tablet in its protective cloth and disappeared into the dense orchard growth. Eleanor watched him go, then turned to face the approaching security team, straightening her back and lifting her chin with the dignity of 6 generations of Wrights who had protected this land. As the men in tactical gear approached, she felt a strange calm settle over her. The tablet was safe with Daniel, and the orchard itself, the land they had helped heal, would protect them both now. Whatever came next, they were no longer alone. In their guardianship, somewhere across the world, other keepers of ancient wisdom were awakening to their purpose, just as the tablet had foreseen. Eleanor Wright stepped forward to meet the intruders, unafraid. The real treasure was already spreading beyond their reach, flowing outward like the healing energy of the tablet itself, unstoppable, life-giving, a remembrance of ancient harmony between humanity and the earth that no corporation could ever truly possess. Daniel moved swiftly through the eastern section of the orchard, the tablet secure in his backpack. The ancient trees seemed to cooperate with his escape, branches shifting to hide his passage, roots suddenly visible to guide his footing across difficult terrain. He'd experienced the orchard's responsiveness before when working with the tablet, but never so directly, never so purposefully. He reached the old boundary wall that marked the eastern edge of Wright property, hesitating only briefly before scaling it. The tablet's power typically diminished when removed from the orchard, but the vision had made it clear. The time had come for the tablet to connect with others of its kind. The ancient knowledge needed to spread beyond the boundaries of a single piece of land, no matter how sacred. As he dropped down on the other side of the wall, Daniel felt the tablet warm against his back, its energy undiminished despite leaving the orchard. Something had changed in their final vision, some activation or awakening that had altered the tablet's connection to place. It was ready to travel, ready to fulfill its greater purpose. Daniel made his way through neighboring properties until he reached the pre-arranged meeting point, an abandoned ranger station in the foothills above the valley. Sarah was already waiting, her small hybrid car hidden beneath camouflage netting. "I saw the Agrinova vehicles," she said, embracing him quickly. "Your grandmother?" "Stayed behind to delay them," Daniel replied, his voice tight with worry. "She insisted." Sarah nodded, unsurprised. Eleanor Wright understands sacrifice. In service of guardianship, she'll handle herself better than you might expect. She gestured to her car. "We need to move quickly. Dr. Chun is arranging transport to get you out of the state." Agrinova's reach is long, but not limitless. As Daniel carefully placed his backpack in the car, Sarah's phone chimed with a message. Her eyes widened as she read it. "What is it?" Daniel asked. "A colleague in New Mexico, Dr. Begay, at the Indigenous Knowledge Center. 3 days ago, a Hopi elder discovered an ancient stone disc with markings that, well, look." She turned her phone toward Daniel. The image showed a circular stone tablet covered in symbols that, while different in specific design from their own tablet, shared unmistakable pattern elements and energy signature. "The vision," Daniel whispered. "It's happening already. The network is awakening." Sarah nodded. "And there's more. Reports from Peru, Ethiopia, Mongolia, all within the past month. Ancient objects with similar properties being rediscovered by families with historical connections to sacred lands." Daniel felt a surge of hope powerful enough to temporarily displace his worry for his grandmother. The tablet showed us this would happen. Ancient knowledge reawakening around the world, just when the earth needs it most. And just when powerful interests are most desperate to control it, Sarah added grimly. Agrinova isn't the only organization searching for these artifacts. There's a race beginning between those who would use this knowledge for healing and those who would exploit it for power. As they drove away from the valley, Daniel kept his hand on the backpack containing the tablet. Its warmth reassured him, a steady pulse like a heartbeat against his palm. The ancient stone had chosen the Wrights for a reason, not just to save their orchard, but to participate in something far greater. Now that purpose was expanding, evolving into a journey he could never have imagined when he first returned to help his grandmother. What happens next? He asked Sarah as the valley receded behind them. First, we ensure your safety and that of the tablet. Then we begin connecting with other guardians. Dr. Begay has offered sanctuary at the Indigenous Knowledge Center, where several tribal elders have been anticipating this awakening for decades. And my grandmother? Sarah's expression softened. Dr. Chun will ensure her protection. Eleanor Wright is more resourceful than you know, and she has friends in places even Agrinova cannot reach easily. Trust that she has her own part to play in what's coming. As the car wound through the mountain passes, Daniel gazed back at the valley where Wright orchards had stood for generations. From this distance, he could see how the land had changed, the vibrant green of their property standing in stark contrast to the more subdued colors of surrounding farms. The tablet's healing influence had created a visible marker, a beacon of restoration that could not be hidden. He realized then that the physical tablet, important as it was, represented only part of the awakening. The knowledge it contained had already begun to spread through the land itself, through the neighboring farms that had adopted their methods, through the research papers and agricultural studies documenting the Wright phenomenon. Even if Agrinova somehow claimed the tablet, they could never truly possess its power. The ancient wisdom was already flowing outward, finding new channels, new guardians. The tablet warmed again in his backpack, as if confirming his thoughts. Daniel smiled despite the uncertainty ahead. His grandmother had taught him that true guardianship wasn't about hoarding knowledge, but sharing it wisely. The tablet had chosen the Wright family not because they were special, but because they understood the fundamental truth, at the heart of the ancient wisdom, that humanity's well-being and the Earth's health were inseparable, interdependent aspects of the same sacred balance. Whatever challenges lay ahead, that truth would continue to spread, taking root in fertile ground just as surely as the almond trees had flourished under their care. The ancient network was awakening, and not even the most powerful corporations in the world could stop what had been set in motion thousands of years ago, patiently waiting for the moment when humanity would most need to remember what it had forgotten. As the mountains embraced them, Daniel felt the tablet pulse once more, not with fear or urgency, but with something that felt remarkably like hope. 1 year after discovering the ancient tablet, Eleanor Wright stood at the edge of her transformed orchard, morning light filtering through almond branches heavy with the most abundant crop in the farm's long history. Her eyes, bright with purpose despite her 76 years, surveyed the vibrant ecosystem that had once been a struggling drought-stricken property on the verge of foreclosure. The morning mist swirled with that now familiar bluish tinge, dancing across rows of trees so vital they seemed to pulse with their own inner light. In the distance, a group of agricultural students from 3 continents listened attentively as Dr. Sarah Martinez explained the fundamentals of what had become known worldwide as the Wright method of regenerative agriculture. Eleanor smiled, remembering how differently things had unfolded after that dramatic confrontation with Agrinova's security team. Rather than arresting her or forcing their way through the property as she had feared, the corporate agents had found themselves confronted not just by one elderly farmer, but by dozens of neighboring farmers, community members, and environmental activists who had rallied to protect the woman whose methods had begun to revitalize the entire valley. The standoff had made national news, transforming Eleanor overnight from a local curiosity to a symbol of resistance against corporate agricultural control. Journalists descended on Tehachapi Valley, eager to document the miracle orchard and the grassroots movement that had defended it. What Agrinova had intended as a quiet acquisition had instead become a public relations nightmare that exposed their interest in ancient agricultural artifacts and their attempts to monopolize traditional farming knowledge. The tablet itself remained safely hidden, transported by Daniel to the Indigenous Knowledge Center in New Mexico, where it had been reunited with Eleanor 3 months later. Dr. Natalie Begay, the center's director, had recognized the tablet's significance immediately, connecting its markings to prophecies preserved in multiple indigenous traditions, about a time when ancient wisdom would reawaken to help heal humanity's relationship with the earth. Under the center's protection, Eleanor and Daniel had continued their study of the tablet, now enriched by the perspectives of indigenous elders and scholars who recognized similar principles in their own traditional knowledge systems. What had begun as one family's desperate attempt to save their farm had blossomed into an international collaboration of traditional knowledge keepers, environmental scientists, and agricultural innovators. The Wright Orchard had become more than just a successful agricultural venture. It was now a globally recognized teaching center, where farmers from around the world came to learn principles of land regeneration that bridged ancient wisdom and modern science. The Dead Sea Scrolls expert headline that had initially drawn attention to their discovery had evolved into something far more significant: recognition that the tablet represented a form of ecological knowledge that predated not just the Bible, but most of humanity's written record. Dr. Rebecca Goldstein's research team had carefully documented the tablet's markings, publishing papers that sent ripples through the archaeological community. Without revealing the tablet's location or supernatural properties, they had established its authenticity and historical significance, dating it to approximately 10,000 BC, far older than any previously known written language. The Wright method, as it came to be known, was being studied and implemented on farms across continents. While the tablet remained their secret, its wisdom was transforming modern agriculture in ways that bridged the gap between past and present, between indigenous knowledge and scientific understanding. Daniel had completed his doctorate, earning international recognition for his groundbreaking research integrating archaeological insights with contemporary environmental science. Universities worldwide offered him prestigious positions, but he had chosen to establish the Wright Foundation for Agricultural Renewal, working directly with farming communities facing climate change challenges. The mysterious corporate interests that had once threatened their peace were now held at bay by the tablet's very public profile. The stone itself might remain hidden, but its principles were now so widely dispersed that no single entity could hope to control them. The orchard's natural protections, strengthened by the tablet's energy and the Wright family's deepening understanding, kept unwanted attention at bay while welcoming those who came with genuine desire to learn. Sarah Martinez still visited daily, her role evolving from academic researcher to global ambassador for the integration of ancient agricultural knowledge with contemporary science. Her expertise in translating traditional wisdom into modern frameworks had proved invaluable in helping others understand the tablet's messages. And now she helped Eleanor and Daniel share that knowledge with the world in ways that honored both ancient traditions and modern understanding. The bank manager who had once threatened foreclosure now pointed to Wright orchards as a model of sustainable agriculture. The same development companies that had pressured Eleanor to sell now sent representatives to learn from their methods. The orchard's success had sparked a revival of small-scale farming across the region, helping other families maintain their ancestral lands while embracing a more harmonious relationship with the natural world. But beyond the material success, the greatest transformation had been in the Wright family themselves. Eleanor was no longer just a struggling farmer, but a revered elder, helping others reconnect with the land's deep wisdom. Daniel had found his true calling, bridging the worlds of academic knowledge and practical land stewardship. Together, they had discovered that their family's legacy was far richer and more important than they had ever imagined. As Eleanor watched the morning sun illuminate her flourishing trees, she remembered that first moment of discovery, when her hands had brushed against something smooth and flat beneath the rocky soil. The tablet had seemed like a miraculous salvation. Then, a possible rescue for her failing orchard. Now she understood it had been something far more significant, a key to unlocking not just the land's potential, but humanity's forgotten understanding of how to live in harmony with the natural world. "Grandmother," Daniel called, approaching from the main house with a tablet computer in hand. "The live conference is about to begin. Farmers from 40 countries are waiting to hear from you." Eleanor nodded, taking a moment to appreciate the irony an ancient stone tablet had led to her speaking to the world through a modern electronic one. As she turned toward the house, she felt the familiar weight of responsibility, not as a burden but as a privilege. The tablet had chosen the right family not just to save their land, but to help spread a message the entire world desperately needed to remember. The global network of rediscovered artifacts continued to grow, each finding its way to proper guardians through what seemed like miraculous coincidence, but was actually the careful design of ancient wisdom. From the Andean mountains to the African savanna, from the forests of Siberia to the islands of the Pacific, sacred objects were awakening, calling to those whose ancestral connections prepared them to understand what modern science was only beginning to grasp, that the earth itself was a living system, and humanity's proper role was not domination but partnership. Eleanor took her place before the camera, her weathered face radiating the quiet confidence of someone who had found her purpose. As thousands of farmers around the world tuned in to learn from this unlikely agricultural revolutionary, she began. Not with technical details or scientific explanations, but with the simple truth at the heart of everything the tablet had taught them. "The land remembers," she said, her voice strong and clear. "And if we listen carefully enough, it will teach us how to remember too." The impact of the Wright tablet's discovery extended far beyond agriculture. As knowledge of its principles spread, researchers in fields ranging from environmental science to public health began recognizing patterns that connected with their own disciplines. The tablet's integrated approach to natural systems offered insights relevant to watershed management, forest restoration, urban planning, and even human health. Dr. Maya Patel, a leading immunologist who had visited the orchard seeking relief from chronic health issues, was among the first to make these broader connections. After spending just 2 weeks at Wright Orchards, she experienced such significant improvements in her autoimmune condition that she began researching the potential relationship between human health and environments managed according to the Wright method. The principles that restore balance to damaged ecosystems may have parallels in restoring balance to human biological systems, she explained in a groundbreaking paper published in a prestigious medical journal. The tablet's wisdom suggests that health, whether of soil, plants, animals, or humans, emerges from proper relationship within living systems, rather than from controlling or suppressing natural processes. This perspective sparked what became known as the Integrative Systems Health movement, an approach that considered human well-being as inseparable from environmental health. Medical centers began establishing gardens based on Wright principles. Hospitals redesigned their grounds to incorporate regenerative landscaping, and health researchers documented measurable improvements in patient outcomes when healing environments were created using tablet-derived wisdom. The corporate world, initially hostile to the Wright method's challenge to industrial agriculture, gradually began to adapt as economic realities shifted. Companies that had once sought to control the tablet's knowledge through acquisition now competed to demonstrate their commitment to its principles. Wright Certified became a valuable designation for products ranging from food to pharmaceuticals to building materials, signifying alignment with regenerative processes. Even AgriNova, following a complete restructuring after the public relations disaster of their attempted raid, emerged with new leadership committed to transitioning toward regenerative methods. Their former head of security, James Rodriguez, had experienced such a profound change of heart after visiting the orchard that he now led the company's sustainability initiatives, working directly with the Wright Foundation to implement tablet-derived principles across their global operations. What I originally saw as a threat to corporate interests, I now recognize as the greatest opportunity of our time, Rodriguez admitted during a joint presentation with Daniel at a global sustainability conference. The knowledge contained in the tablet and other rediscovered artifacts isn't opposed to progress. It's the key to a more advanced understanding of how human systems can thrive within natural ones. Political systems, too, began to respond to the growing movement. Regions implementing Wright method principles showed such remarkable improvements in water quality, climate resilience, and economic stability that policymakers took notice. International climate agreements began incorporating language about ancient wisdom and indigenous knowledge systems, recognizing that solutions to modern environmental crises might be found in humanity's oldest understandings of natural balance. The network of artifacts continued to expand, each discovery adding new dimensions to the emerging picture. A stone cylinder found in Peru contained information about atmospheric cycles that complemented the Wright tablet's focus on soil regeneration. A clay disc unearthed in Thailand held patterns related to water purification that enhanced understanding of the tablet's hydrological principles. A bone artifact from Mongolia provided insights into animal-plant relationships that completed certain sequences in the Wright tablet symbols. Eleanor and Daniel traveled extensively now, meeting with other guardians to share insights and strengthen connections. The Indigenous Knowledge Center had become the unofficial headquarters for this growing network, its database documenting the parallels and complements between artifacts from different cultures and regions. What's most remarkable, Dr. Begay explained during an international gathering of guardians, is how these artifacts, separated by thousands of miles and years, contain knowledge that fits together like puzzle pieces. It's as if the ancient people who created them knew their wisdom would be fragmented and scattered, but eventually reassembled when humanity needed it most. Not everyone welcomed these developments, of course. Some religious fundamentalists condemned the artifacts as heretical challenges to established spiritual traditions. Certain corporate and political interests continued to resist changes that threatened their power structures. Academic skeptics questioned the authenticity of artifacts that defied conventional archaeological understanding. Yet the results spoke for themselves. Regions implementing tablet-derived principles showed measurable improvements in environmental health, agricultural productivity, and community resilience. The before and after satellite images of areas transformed through Wright method applications became powerful testimony that transcended ideological debates. One unexpected ally emerged in Dr. Thomas Fleming, a prominent climate scientist who had previously dismissed traditional knowledge systems as pre-scientific superstition. After visiting several sites where tablet principles had been implemented, including the Wright Orchard, he became one of the movement's most vocal advocates. I've spent my career analyzing climate data and developing complex models to predict environmental changes, he acknowledged during a widely viewed TED Talk. But what these ancient artifacts have revealed is a different way of knowing, an understanding of natural systems not through isolation and analysis of components, but through recognition of relationships and patterns. This isn't primitive knowledge. It's sophisticated ecological wisdom that our modern science is only beginning to comprehend. As the movement grew, Eleanor found herself increasingly called upon to share the story of the tablet's discovery and its impact on her life. Though she carefully avoided revealing its supernatural aspects to general audiences, she spoke openly about the transformation of both her land and her understanding. I was a practical farmer facing bankruptcy, she would tell audiences around the world. I wasn't looking for mystical experiences or global movements. I just wanted to save my family's orchard. But what I discovered beneath that rocky soil was something far more valuable than I could have imagined, a reminder that human beings once knew how to live as part of the earth rather than apart from it, and that this knowledge remains available to us if we're humble enough to receive it. On the anniversary of the tablet's discovery, a special celebration was held at Wright Orchards. Guardians from around the world gathered with scientists, farmers, indigenous elders, and environmental activists, a living embodiment of the integration. The tablet had helped inspire. As twilight fell, they assembled in the eastern section of the orchard where Eleanor had first unearthed the ancient stone. Daniel had prepared a special presentation, mapping the global network of artifacts and their impacts. The visualization showed lines of influence spreading outward from each discovery site, connecting across continents to form a pattern that, when complete, remarkably resembled the central symbol on the Wright tablet itself. What we're witnessing, he explained to the assembled guests, isn't just the rediscovery of ancient wisdom, but the reactivation of a system of knowledge deliberately preserved and distributed by our ancestors. They understood cycles of civilization that were only beginning to recognize, how societies rise and fall, how knowledge is gained and lost, how humans alternate between harmony with nature and destructive exploitation. Eleanor stepped forward, her presence commanding despite her years. The tablet didn't just save our orchard, she said, her voice carrying clearly in the evening air. It reminded us that true prosperity comes not from conquering the natural world, but from remembering our place within it. This knowledge doesn't belong to the Wright family or to any single tradition or discipline. It belongs to all life on Earth, and our role as guardians is simply to help it flow where it's needed most. As darkness fell completely, the guardians, from different traditions, each shared a brief ceremony honoring their particular artifact and its wisdom. When Eleanor's turn came, she simply placed her hands on the earth of her orchard, a gesture of gratitude and recognition that needed no elaborate ritual to express the essential relationship between humans and the land that sustains them. What happened next was witnessed by hundreds, but described differently by each. Some spoke of an unusual aurora-like light that seemed to rise from the ground rather than descend from the sky. Others reported hearing harmonies that reminded them of ancient languages or natural sounds: flowing water, rustling leaves, distant thunder. Many experienced a profound sense of connection, not just to those present, but to countless generations before and after their own. The scientific instruments that several researchers had brought to the gathering recorded unusual electromagnetic patterns and soil vibrations, but nothing that could explain the shared experience that many described simply as remembering, a momentary but profound reconnection with knowledge that seemed simultaneously new and deeply familiar. As the experience faded, leaving the gathering in silent awe, Eleanor felt the tablet's energy pulsing through the ground beneath her feet. The ancient stone, safely stored at the Indigenous Knowledge Center, remained physically distant, but energetically present, its purpose continuing to unfold through the humans who had answered its call. She looked at the diverse group assembled. In her orchard, people of different ages, cultures, disciplines, and traditions, all united by recognition of the wisdom contained in the tablet and its sister artifacts. What had begun with one elderly farmer's desperate discovery had blossomed into a global movement reconnecting humanity with its oldest and most essential understanding, that the earth was not a resource to be exploited, but a living system to be honored, that human ingenuity found its highest expression not in domination but in harmonious participation. As the gathering dispersed into small conversations and celebrations that would continue through the night, Eleanor found a quiet moment with Daniel beneath the oldest almond tree in the orchard. "Did you ever imagine this?" he asked, gesturing toward the joyful gathering, "when you first found that stone?" Eleanor smiled, remembering her initial shock and confusion, the tablet's mysterious markings, her fear of losing the orchard. "Never," she admitted. "I was just trying to survive." Another season. And now you've helped launch a global renaissance of ecological wisdom, Daniel said proudly. Eleanor shook her head gently. Not me, she corrected. The tablet chose our family because this land had been protected by generations of Wrights, who maintained their connection to it, even when they didn't understand why. We were just the right soil for this particular seed to grow in. Daniel nodded, understanding the distinction. Their role had never been to create something new, but to help remember something ancient, to serve as conduits for knowledge that had been preserved through millennia specifically for this critical moment in human history. As they rejoined the celebration, Eleanor felt a deep contentment that transcended the material success of her rejuvenated orchard, or even the global impact of the tablet's wisdom. The true treasure had been the reminder that humans were not separate from the natural world but integral to it, that the path forward for humanity lay not in more sophisticated domination of nature, but in more humble and intelligent participation in its processes. The ancient tablet, with its mysterious blue-tinged stone and enigmatic markings, had indeed led to treasure beyond imagination. Not gold or power or technological marvels, but something far more precious, the remembrance of humanity's original instruction. The knowledge of how to live well upon the earth that had been encoded in human culture since the dawn of consciousness, patiently waiting to be rediscovered when it was needed most. As stars appeared above the blossoming almond trees, Eleanor Wright, once a struggling farmer and now a revered elder, felt the cycle completing itself. What had been buried had been found. What had been forgotten had been remembered. What had been broken was being restored. The tablet had fulfilled its purpose not by changing the world, but by reminding humanity of the wisdom that could help it change itself. And in that remembering lay the greatest hope for all that was yet to come. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.